And joining us now at the table, Tamara Keith. She is White House correspondent for NPR. Elleithee, Democratic strategist and executive director of the Georgetown University Institute for Politics and Public Service, and Republican strategist Brad Todd. Thank you guys for being with us. Tam, let me start with you as the lady at the table. Chivalry is not dead on this day. Is this going the way that Chris Christie thinks it's going?
Well, he's going to get in. He's going to get the attention, as you say. And then he gets to make the case that Trump is the emperor who has no clothes.
But who's listening to that case?
Well, it's not clear. He's given up part of his platform because he's not going to be able to be on TV every Sunday making that case. It's a real open question, but I think it's important to note that it's very early. Yes, there is a mini bus full of candidates. It could require an entire bus by the time the field is fully filled out. But then people do drop out. And it's not like all of these people are necessarily going to be in until the very end. If you look at the Democratic primary in 2020, it looked like there was the Bernie Sanders lane and then the establishment lane.
Right.
And it seemed like Sanders could win. And then the establishment lane, everyone dropped out except for Joe Biden, and all of those votes flowed to him.
Brad, let me ask you, this is a tale of two Chris's in some ways, right? You got Chris Christie, you got Chris Sununu, two very different strategies about how they hope to stop Donald Trump from being the next president of the United States. Which of them is more effective?
Well, I think there's two strategies, right? There's the eclipse strategy and there's the conquered strategy. Chris Christie believes that Donald Trump must be conquered. Chris Sununu believes he must be eclipsed, right? Everybody consolidates around one other choice that's somewhat different from Donald Trump, and therefore he doesn't have to be conquered. The math, I think, is interesting as well. You show those poll numbers now. This is Trump's high water mark. If you look back at the most recent NBC poll back in April, there were about 45% for Donald Trump, I think 46, and 45 for everybody else who had a preference. And so Donald Trump has a ceiling. I think it's short of 50% in my view in the primary, but with 17 states being winner take all, it needs to be well short of 50.
Yeah, I think that's true. Mo, let me ask you about this quickly. So you got this. First of all, Chris Christie's got to have to figure out who's going to be listening to him on the GOP side right now. But he's also got to try to do something that's different than what he did in 2016. It certainly sounds like he doesn't have a strategy that's all that different than that. It appears in the past that he's done something that's impossible. He's alienated Republicans of all sides. Here's what he said about 2016. Take a listen.
Part of what happened in 2016, I'll be honest with you, we all made a strategic error. We did. I mean, look, I'm happy to own my mistakes. I've made plenty of them. And that was one of them. We all kind of thought, all right, don't go after him now, because once I get past Jeb and Marco and John and Carly and Ted and, then I'll have trouble one-on-one, and then I'll take him on. I don't know if I ever got there. It was over. It was over quick. So that was a strategic error. Secondly, I stayed with him in 2016 because I didn't want Hillary Clinton to be president. And I don't make any apologies for that.
To be fair, he endorsed Trump when other Republicans were still in the field. But what do you make of that assessment from Chris Christie's?
He's not wrong, right? In 2016, every Republican candidate was running for number two, the number two slot, so that they could then be the person left standing against Trump. That doesn't seem to be what he's trying to do this time, right? I mean, this time he's saying, I'm going after Trump from day one. Look, Chris Christie has to, I think, be politically astute to know he's not going to be the Republican nominee for president. It appears that this is simply a political kamikaze mission, where he's going in to try to help everyone else out by taking out Trump. There's a couple of ways to take out Trump, I would think. From a messaging perspective, on electability, right, and his record of hurting the party over the last three cycles, and as Ron DeSantis is starting to do a little bit, by going after his inability to follow through on his promises. You promised us the wall, you didn't do it, right? Yeah. That's from a substantive perspective. But there's also a stylistic way to go after Trump. Donald Trump is not your traditional candidate. He's a bare-knuckle brawler. You got to be authentic to. If you're going to take on a bare-knuckle brawler, you've got to bring your bare knuckles, and you have to be able to do it authentically. None of those others really seem all that authentic in that kind of a fight. Christie can have that fight, might bruise Trump up enough to give somebody else a chance if everyone else coalesces.
Yeah, the bare knuckles of Chris Christie's were enough to knock Marco Rubio out of the race just a few years ago. So you got Sununu here, you got Chris Christie here. They both want to defeat Trump. They want to kind of return to that old GOP that may not exist anymore right now. And then you got DeSantis who's trying to sort of outflank Trump on a lot of these things, including some of those cultural issues. Is that the better way to do this?
Right. He's trying to go to Trump's right on immigration, sending people on buses and planes to liberal cities.
On woke talk, right?
Right.
And the like.
Yes, and there's a lot of, I'm going to be the anti-woke. We need to de-wokeify America, make it just like Florida.
Yeah.
He's facing some challenges in Florida legally on some of his policies. And additionally, it's just not clear that the entire American public is actually as worried about wokeism or even understands what it is as he is acting like they are.
So, Brad, if you want Trump, then why is pursuing more Trumpism than Trump does the strategy?
Well,
for someone
I think
like
what Ron
DeSantis?
DeSantis is betting on is that Trump is not a native of the conservative movement and that his instincts, while they were right in 2016, they may not be right now. You know, Trump attacked DeSantis over his fight with Disney. Most Republicans sided with Ron DeSantis over Disney. He's attacked Ron DeSantis on how he handled COVID. Most Republicans thought he did a pretty good job of that. He attacked Florida on the abortion law. Most Republicans probably sided with Florida's effort on that. And so Trump, his instincts may be off, and that's what DeSantis is betting.
What's DeSantis' most effective line against Donald Trump? What do you think has worked? We've seen it for 2 weeks now. What do you think might stick?
I think the most effective way for him to handle it is just to praise what Donald Trump did on policy and say, but he can't do it next. He can't beat Joe Biden. He can't do more. I can do more. He can do what he did before. I would hand him the gold watch and try to retire him.
Trump world is reacting to this by saying that it is a sign of DeSantis' weakness right now. The way they've seen him out of the field, the way they say he sort of flip-flops on some of these different things. He's trying to outdo Trump at his own game. What do you make of that effort?
Yeah, I think Ron DeSantis is suffering from overly high expectations, right? For months, everyone was talking about Ron DeSantis as the one guy. It's hard to say that when he's never played on this stage before. And he's had more than one stumble in these early stages. I think he has the most potent message so far of any of the Republican candidates.
DeSantis.
DeSantis, the electability, the why didn't you get this done the first time, and to some extent, the cultural battlefield that seems to animate the Republican Party right now. But he hasn't been necessarily the best messenger at it. It's still early. He's got time to get better, but it was sort of a weak start, which has, I think, given the Trump folks a bit of a bounce to their steps. Enter Chris Christie to try to take that bounce away and give DeSantis a chance to recover.
It could go the other way with Chris Christie, though. You know, Donald Trump's one essential ingredient that he brings for Republican voters that even Republican voters who don't like a lot of things about him value is his combat readiness. Donald Trump is always willing to do combat with the left or with the media. And Republicans, that's the first quality. That's a barrier to entry. You can't get in the race without it. And so if Donald Trump takes on Chris Christie and obliterates him, it might make him even bigger in the eyes of Republican voters who see that combat readiness as the first step.
Hey, Mo, while I have you here, I want to ask you, as the Democrat at the table, we heard today that Cornel West is looking to be an independent candidate at the general election in 2024. You've seen RFK. Some recent polling shows he polls at 20% among Democrats. Sort of, it would seem like the avatar for those Democrats who are worried about Joe Biden's age right now. Which is more dangerous to Joe Biden? Is it RFK Jr. or is it the potential third-party candidate like a Cornel West?
Yeah, I don't think RFK Jr. is going to be a huge threat to Joe Biden. In the early primary states, the way the Democratic calendar is shaping up, he's not really registering. And at the end of the day, the people he seems to be appealing to are more centrist, independent Democrats, according to the polling.
Then, is that a risk?
I would be worried about any legitimate third-party candidate from the left in a general election, because our elections are just so divided these days. They're all razor-thin margins. He can't afford any bleed in a general election, but he'll be fine in the primaries.
Sam, you and I cover, obviously, the White House, so we talk to these folks behind closed doors on occasion. You really get a sense of where they are. I hear that concern about a third party. They try to hide it on occasion, but they recognize every vote counts, and right now there's not a lot of votes to play with.
Well, and I think that they are more alarmed, concerned, annoyed with something like a no labels that is trying to get on ballots all over the country, trying to find a centrist candidate, trying to find someone to potentially be a spoiler.
Cornel West is not the name that they bring up when they talk about frustration.
No,
that's right.
No, that's not who they talk about.
But that's because they're worried that they bet 3 years on not being in the center. You know, now we've seen in the last couple of weeks he's tried to do that again, but that's why they're worried about a centrist third party.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. It's always good to be with you, Mo. Brad, nice to see you in person. Tam, we'll see you back at the North Lawn in just a couple hours from now, I trust.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.